Hey everybody, great to be back with you again. We're talking about paradiddles today. And paradiddles are just one of the most enriching patterns that we can be spending time with as drummers. I remember fondly that the single paradiddle, which I'm going to be talking about in today's video, was a part of my very first drum lesson when I was just 10 years old. And I find them really fun and fascinating and definitely worth my while to keep really sharp. So let's really put a fine point on some of our paradiddle work today in this lesson, and I'm going to kind of call this a summative lesson in the single paradiddle. I will take for granted that we already know the basic pattern, paradiddle, which as a one of many onomatopoetic snare drum drum patterns that we have. How we say it is how we play it. So paradiddle, if I just started on my right hand, the para are two alternating strokes and diddle is two strokes in the same hand. So paradiddle. And I'm prepping my left hand because were I to play a second paradiddle, my left hand is just going to initiate that same pattern. So paradiddle is a great pattern that has our hands moving in an alternating way, even though the way that we get there is through a combination of single, single, double, double, single, single, double, double, right? Now, one thing that when I think summative exercises with paradiddles is that there's going to be about 3 or 4 things that I would have you parallel processing, you know, in terms of parallel processing, that you're thinking of 3 or 4 things kind of at the same time as you're playing this pattern. So, so we assume that you have the ability to play this combination of strokes as a sequence without making any errors. So one of the first things that I'll think about in terms of the paradiddle is that natural stress. The very first note of the 4 notes, paradiddle, where you might put either a strong accent or maybe a just slightly stressed note. And you might, as a matter of first way of kind of hearing and keeping track of your paradiddles, just put this aspect, the accented first note, on its own control knob, that you can go between barely expressed to severely accented. I'll demonstrate that. I'll go from barely expressed accent up to, you know, pretty accented, and then back again. So just the quality of that initiating emphasis or accent, that would be one thing that I would ask you to keep track of in this exercise. The second thing is, I love the paradiddle, the single paradiddle in particular, for talking about stroke types. And drummers of all backgrounds and artistic practices, there's a lot of drummers that ascribe to a concept of 4 basic stroke types. And those 4 are full, downstrokes, upstrokes, and tap strokes. Full strokes, downstrokes, upstrokes, and tap strokes. The single paradiddle uses 3 of those 4 in a really elegant, predictable, easy to track pattern. And the accented note, the paradiddle, the very first note, is a nice downstroke. So when we play this, our hand is going to stay down, close to the drum. The second note is an upstroke. It's a soft stroke that has a soft volume, and the main interest here in the upstroke is that it prepares our hand for the next accented note. So here's one paradiddle, and I want you to watch this left hand. So I went down, up, and then 2 taps. Those are those other strokes. So we have down, up, tap, tap, down, up, tap, tap. And those tap strokes, by the way, tap strokes are really they're just soft strokes. They begin and they end really close to the drum. Very soft. So the first way that we're thinking of the paradiddle as this kind of accented, emphasized first note that helps create some phrase structure to the pattern that we can really hear. The second thing is that we're really tracking our stroke types so that our hands are just always in control, and that of the 4 notes of a paradiddle, the first note is accented, but 3 of those notes are actually quite soft. And when we are mindful of our upstrokes and tap strokes, I find that it helps to keep those 3 non-accented notes nice and low to the drum. Okay, the third aspect that I'll incorporate into this conversation with paradiddles is an idea of rhythmic transposition. Now, this is really so fun to play with, and we can explore the concept of rhythmic transposition with so many patterns from the rudiments, flam and flam tap. Oh my gosh, so many. But with paradiddle, the idea of rhythmic transposition is that we're going to take this 4-note grouping. You know, a pattern that's so easy to hear, this grouping of 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to transpose this pattern into different subdivisions. That's the rhythmic transposition part. So one of the first steps that I like to try to encourage students to do is from a pattern of 4 to a pattern of 6. And it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I just played those subdivisions on hi-hat, and now 6. So, if I played the paradiddle pattern in groupings of 4 and then groupings of 6, it would sound like this. So the idea that you'll take your 4-note single paradiddle, and instead of thinking in terms of 16th notes or 8th notes, where the pattern of 4 will really regularly correspond to the beat, well, when you put it in a subdivision like 6, you see that the pattern, the natural stress pattern of paradiddle, now forms a new rhythmic relationship to the primary beat. Paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. And I would challenge those of us on this lesson to play single paradiddles in rhythmic subdivisions of 1 up to 8. And that would include such things as playing paradiddles in a rhythmic subdivision of 3 to the beat, aka eighth note triplets. Sound like this. Or perhaps quintuplets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Paradiddle, 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 par. Sixes we already heard. So the idea of playing your single paradiddle but in different speeds relative to the beat. And then a final, like a fourth way of really putting a fine point on your single paradiddle would be the concept of rotation. So, no matter what subdivision we're playing, I'll go back to 4. So here's paradiddles, subdivision 4. Is that relative to the beat, I would also practice, and this is the fourth kind of, parallel processing manner of thinking about the paradiddle, is rotation. So I'll take this paradiddle where the strong accent is starting right on the beat, and I'll rotate the whole pattern over one subdivision. And you'll hear that the paradiddle accent is going to be shifted one subdivision off of away from the beat. If I did that rotation again, the accent would shift over to the 3rd space in my 16th notes, and then the 4th space. And then by the time that I rotated it again, I'll be back to where I started again. Let me play it. You likely can hear it easier than my words can express it. E, and a 4. Shift. And. One more time, shifted. 1. Last time, 1. So these exercises have long been known to drummers. In fact, I can pretty quickly point out what I just demonstrated. For example, in the pages of George Stone's Stick Control, one of the most iconic drum exercises known to drummers all over the world. This idea of a paradiddle being rotated around to these different locations is present from some of the first pages of this great iconic drum exercise book, Stick Control. Okay, so bringing it back to drums, we ultimately want this paradiddle to be useful to us as we're playing drum set in context to a song with bands and musicians that we're jamming with. So what I would suggest is once you really feel that your paradiddle is comfortably in control, that you have command over not just the pattern, but the deep concepts that are at play with the paradiddle, I would then have you turn it to some real music, some great hits that have been recorded. And what I like to do is when I'm looking to practice and really refine my single paradiddle is try to identify some songs where there's some really stable 16th note grid or groove happening in the track. And some songs here that come to mind would be, for example, Lenny Kravitz's song, It Ain't Over Till It's Over. which is BPM somewhere in the 80s. And you would not hear paradiddles when you're hearing this song. But nonetheless, you hear a lot of 16th notes. Another great song would be something like Bjork's Human Behavior, which starts off with just some 16ths on the snare. But you're hearing those 16ths, and the idea that you might just slip into a alternating single paradiddle sticking will, it helps it to kind of, first of all, give it some nice hand-to-hand motion that can get you an automatic backbeat. And if you split your hands and move one hand to any other sound, could be a hi-hat, or a ride cymbal, or tom-toms. So from the single paradiddle, spending time just deeply internalizing the pattern, the sequence of notes, single, single, double, double, single, single, double, double. Moving past the internalization of that pattern and thinking of it in terms of a pattern that really exists as 16th notes, and with an accent that's on the beat. This lesson was aiming to, make us realize that this single paradiddle can now move and evolve and become a little bit more nuanced and slippery by means of rotating the accent and by means of subjecting it to rhythmic transposition, and by means of regulating or modulating the stress or the strength of that first accented note. So these are just some ways to take your paradiddle to the next level. And what you're going to find here is that the more you invest in making your paradiddle just as nuanced and nimble and exhilarating as you can, it's just going to be, the return on investment is really considerable here. This is a pattern and a rudiment that a lot of great drummers have been utilizing for generations, and it will serve you, no doubt, when it comes to your fills and your grooves and your ability to populate your drumming with a pattern that is just almost guaranteed to make you sound like a really knowledgeable, experienced player. The paradiddle has been with us, and I hope that it is with you, and that you will reap the rewards of some really focused practice here. Good luck.